Greetings, everyone in the USA, around the world, and welcome back to the Smooth Thrills Radio Hour, Series 1. I'm your host, Jason Rutledge. So this week, Nathan and I are discussing a very serious take on The End of the World, the 1983 TV movie, The Day After. So if you ask anyone who was around in 1983, they probably have a story about when they watched this one. It really is one of those rare, made-for-TV movies that is seared into our collective cultural memory. We hope you enjoy our take on this classic, and if you haven't seen it, you check it out, see what you think. We recorded this one back in January on the same day as we did the Savage Steve Holland episode, so our new friend Sophie the dog was still wandering around in the studio, so if you think you hear the sound of a collar jingle followed by a tail bonking into something, that's what that is. So on with the show. But before we get started, Steve Guttenberg has a warning for all of you.
Hey, you can't see it, you can't feel it, and you can't taste it. But it's here, right now, all around us. It's going through you like an X-ray, right into your cells. What do you think killed all these animals?
It does, yeah. Oh, okay. Now it's doing that thing. Okay, that's cool. But it wasn't doing the thing before.
Okay,
Which
that's a good
me.
thing that it's doing the thing.
I should hope so. Damn technology. Technology has ruined our entire lives. You know that? It's ruined everything it touched.
That's what I hear.
Okay, so we're going to start off the usual way, you think? We're going to say something like, welcome back to another shocking episode. Broadcast from Old East Dallas of the Smooth Thrills Radio Hour. Today we're talking about, what would you say, the feel-good movie of the 80s?
The feel-good movie of 1983.
Specifically November of 1983, the feel-good movie.
And it's not Bob Fosse's Star 80.
When did that come out? It wasn't in 1980.
No, it was in 1983.
Well, then why didn't they call it? Never mind. I don't want to know.
Because it was, yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Because I don't even remember
It
what
took
was
place
about.
in 80.
Oh,
Or
okay.
The end of it took place in 80.
This is very confusing.
At any rate.
Anyway, we're talking about The Day After. I have a personal connection to this movie just based on how old I was when I saw it, circumstances that were going on at the time when I saw it. Now, you mentioned earlier before we started recording that you may have missed out on this one. It came a little too early for you, and you caught up with it in later viewings. What was your impression of it when you saw it, in the context of when you saw it?
It was kind of forbidden for me to see it in its first run because I was like 6, going on 7, something like that. But I watched it probably a couple of years later on home video, the NBC home entertainment release. And it was one of those things where my mom wouldn't let me rent it for the longest time. And then she kind of forgot about the movie, And then later on, she's like, oh, it's got Steve Guttenberg. Okay, you could rent it.
Oh, my God.
Jason Robards is in it, that kind of thing. Jo Beth Williams, you love her. So, So when I watched it, it was pretty damn shocking. So I want to say it was probably like 85.
Guttenberg sold mom on the whole idea, huh?
Oh, that was, yeah.
Well, Guttenberg nobody knew who he was when this came out. I mean, Robards was the only
somewhat, yeah. No,
known actor, really,
right.
at the
He was
time.
in between The Man Who Wasn't There and Police Academy. So Police Academy hadn't hit yet. And once it did, then he was like
His
the star
career
of
was
the
over.
80s.
It was just
Yeah, we never heard from him.
never heard from him
They
again.
never made a sequel.
No,
Nothing.
sad, very sad. Was he in Screwballs or?
No, but I bet he wished he was.
He better wish. Well, that was a much.
I
Would have
wish
been
I
a much
were in
better career
Screwballs,
path for him.
but,
Yeah,
yeah.
a lot of people missed out on that, unfortunately. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, I was not forbidden from watching this, but there were people in my class, I guess it was 5th grade, who were, and they were all very sad because everybody knew which kids had permission to watch it and which ones were not going to have permission to watch it. And there was this whole great argument going on over why is he allowed to and I'm not allowed to. And it really was, I can only put it in the context of where I was, which is northwestern Oklahoma, where you simply didn't talk about anything. Especially, you didn't put the words nuclear and war in the same sentence. Otherwise, you might terrify the children into going into comas or something. But it was unavoidable. You could not get away from this thing. I mean, even a little bit later, I think, they were still on this track. They wouldn't talk about this stuff. I mean, the Duran Duran song, Is There Something I Should Know, was banned from my middle school playground because they used this phrase, nuclear war, in the song, and they thought it would terrify us all.
Wow.
I mean, that's how bad this got.
There was an actual, like, plot against Duran Duran at your school.
A minor one, to be fair.
Wow.
Yeah, it didn't really get very far. But that's the kind of mentality we were dealing with. And it was absolutely absurd because everybody in my class, everybody in my school knew exactly what was going on. We knew the primary and secondary nuclear targets that were around us, just based on where the Air Force bases were. We were not that sheltered. It was impossible not to know this stuff. Mm-hmm. It was impossible not to know very bad things were going to happen. The only thing we didn't get until after watching The Day After was, are you going to be one of those who tries to survive, or are you going to be one of those that runs as fast as you can toward the explosion and get it over with? And that's a really heavy thing to put on 11, 12-year-old kids, but that's where we were.
That's, yeah. That brings back like the 50s Adam age scare that kids went through in schools. I mean, that kind of 80s was a reaction to the 50s in a lot of ways.
True.
It brought back a lot of that. But that's people kind of forget this movie now, but it was quite the event.
Huge.
It was like built up for months, I think, as if I recall. I remember seeing news articles and magazines and TV spots for almost like a month or two.
It wasn't even that. I wouldn't call it shocking to anybody once we got into it and were watching it. But that was just because of when we were growing up and what we were dealing with. I mean, even to this day, when I hear a phrase like, there are missiles in the air, I go right back to that moment, 1983, 84, when you were just resigned to the fact that you were going to wake up one morning and it was all going to be done.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't call it necessarily a PTSD response, but it just, you have that memory ingrained in you at all times. What was different about The Day After was, they played this thing up for close to a year. I had never seen a promotion like it since for a television movie because everybody knew this thing was coming. Like February of 83, don't forget this November, The Day After. And they put out booklets. They sent pamphlets out to everywhere to tell people about the movie and how to cope with what they saw. I believe ABC even set up special 1-800 lines for counselors that you could call and talk about your experience after watching The Day After.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Which they didn't do for North and South, I don't think, for any other.
They didn't do it for the Thornbirds.
They didn't do it for they really should have done it for the Thornbirds because that was, no, kids should not have been watching the Thornbirds. I mean, Day After was pretty tame by comparison.
But yeah. And let alone the sequel to the Thornbirds, forget it.
Oh my God, yeah. I was still traumatized by the sequel to the Thornbirds. One thing that also made The Day After very different, I think, was that it was very extensively researched. Nicholas Meyer and, what was the producer's name? Let me check my notes. Papazian spent months researching this thing. Because up to that point, your usual nuclear apocalypse movie, all they really did for it was put a gigantic red-orange filter on the camera lens, maybe have some people rummaging through a gas station, maybe you run across Jan Michael Vincent every once in a while, but that was about it. This was much more grounded. And I think it was much more effective because of that. One story I read about it was they demanded to shoot on location in Kansas City or close to Kansas City to make it as real as possible. This wasn't going to be a backlot kind of thing. And they were talking to FEMA officials in Kansas City. Now, FEMA had only been an independent agency for maybe 3 years at that stage. I think Carter set it up. It was previously under, I think, Housing and Urban Development or something like that, and got broken off into its own independent agency in 79, I want to say. But they talked to these guys and asked them, what is your plan for nuclear war? And all they could say was, well, we're thinking of putting evacuation plans in the front of phone books, and I think we can roll that out in the next 6 years.
Wow. And
they came out of this meeting declaring FEMA to be an absolute joke. It's like, you guys have no idea what you're going to be dealing with here. Well, nobody did.
Right.
Sort of like when we have an accident with a nuclear power plant, it's just, it happens so seldom we don't know what to do about it in reality.
There's no action, it's a reaction. Yeah.
Absolutely. Production began August 16th, 1982. which is a good year before, and everybody knew this was happening. They were hiring locals, putting him in the makeup. I mean, there was no secrets going into this by the time it finally aired.
Do you think that's part of why the promotion was rolled out as early as it was? Because news,
they had to?
Yeah, like they couldn't contain this. Yeah.
That's a possibility. I mean, there's nobody else was doing anything like this, as far as I know. I think
not of that magnitude.
No, I mean, the closest thing you would get is probably, I don't know, China Syndrome, which came up much before.
1979.
But even that doesn't come close to what they were trying to do with this thing.
No.
They did rely very heavily on stock footage. Very, very heavily on stock, some of which I recognized from 16 other movies easily.
Oh, yeah.
I think I detected some sound effects from $6 Million Man thrown in there, and a little bit of Battlestar Galactica stuff kind of dropped in there. Wasn't Battlestar an ABC production originally, or was it?
Yes, it was ABC,
I believe. The entire year they spent making Battlestar Galactica.
So it was $6 Million Man.
That's true.
And
that makes
the guy
sense
who played
now.
Oscar Goldman is in this. No, he's not.
He's not in this.
No, I'm kidding. He's not.
No, practically everybody else
Everyone else is, including
that we
Stephen
know
First.
now.
Yeah.
I was really surprised when Flounder showed up. Because Flounder shows up and he teams up with Dr. Lizardo, and they are in the basement of whatever this junk pile that they go to school in.
Classic comedy team.
It is. Well, I touched on this before we started recording, and it's like that is one problem I had with this movie is that you introduce a whole bunch of characters. We have no idea who they are. I don't know if we're supposed to. They get pretty conveniently vaporized about halfway through the movie, so we don't have to know who they are anymore. But it still seems kind of weird.
Well, it's a disaster movie. So if you look at like those 3-hour disaster films of the 70s, it should have that soap opera scope to it. And it does rush the first like 40 minutes. Like so many characters are introduced.
They do. There's a lot of themes get introduced. They lay it on a little heavy. I mean, we have the first 40 minutes, everybody does what they're supposed to do. They walk around in wheat fields drinking their jugs of milk, and a lot of milk drinking in this movie.
And stealing milk and then
resolving all their conflicts very quickly and quietly. It's not a problem, and then suddenly, bam, the missiles are off. But we do have heavy-handed stuff like kind of what happens in this scene between Jason Robards and his unnamed daughter, I think is their relationship, who's about to move off to Boston. I'm going to play this clip for you real quick and get your reaction to this.
Daddy, I'm moving to Boston.
Oh. How come?
See, that's why I didn't want to tell you right away. I have to deal with your hurt feelings and Mom's,
All I asked was why.
Pop, it's time for me to leave home.
But you haven't been living at home for 2 years.
An apartment 26 blocks away isn't exactly Independence, Missouri, you know.
Of course, choosing Boston wouldn't have anything to do with, what's his name?
Gary.
Gary, starting Tufts Medical this fall.
No. Well, maybe a little. But it's not like we're going to be living together or anything. At least not right away. Growing up, it's like growing apart. Maybe it's a natural phenomenon.
Have you told your mother?
Tomorrow. I thought I'd start with you and work my way up.
Oh, I'm easy.
Easier.
It's not so easy, you know.
What?
Saying goodbye.
Ooh. Foreshadowing. Like when the audience doesn't know what's about to occur here. Yeah, it's a little much.
And Robards gets most of the action in this movie. He's kind of the central figure.
Yeah.
Although it tapers off into other...
Does it, though?
Well, you get to... When Steve Guttenberg goes to that house with the family, you learn more about them. I mean, you've seen some of that stuff up to that point, but they just touch on things.
He meets up with the Northern Exposure guy and his Cuckoo Nutso family living in the basement.
B.B. Besh, who was in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan by Nicholas Meyer, by the way. I think that's the only connection between those two.
Well, that's a good connection to have, I
Yeah,
suppose. I
but
mean, it
you
could have
figure
been.
like he could have had some of the other people in there too.
He didn't bring
He's got
any of his
so
old
many-
Invasion of the Bee-Girls staff onto the day after.
And man, William Smith isn't even in this.
Wow. Just
Talk
cast
about a
them
missed
aside.
opportunity. Yeah.
That's gratitude for you.
He could have been a pissed off mayor or something, you know?
Stop me. But we do get a lot of this stuff. Like, we have the couple that's about to get married, have the daughter who's about to move away to Boston to start her life, the pregnant woman who's overdue and just about to give birth. I mean, we're just like the cop
such a
who's
cliche.
who's 2 days away from retirement, away from checking off every single box on the way down.
For this shit, almost.
Just about made it, but they pulled back, showed a little bit of restraint, a little bit. But we do get a lot of exposition in that first 45, 50 minutes, which I believe was the section that ran with commercials.
Well, that's right.
They ran the second half commercial free, which is now supposed to be this badge of honor, like, we don't want to interrupt your viewing experience. What it means is they couldn't sell ad time. They couldn't find anybody who wanted to throw a Pampers ad in the middle of all of this disaster, which would have seemed really
Nabisco
weird.
wasn't signing up for this.
No, nobody thought to run an ad for like
McDonald's,
canned
nothing.
beans or something. That would have been a good tie-in.
Rations. Yeah.
Nowadays, we would have no such
Vienna sausages
shame
or
about
something.
this.
Yeah.
apocalypse coming, Boston.
Yeah. Or,
Bush's baked
alcohol
beans.
ads or
Alcohol.
something. Yeah.
Well, they weren't running alcohol ads.
That's true. Cigarettes, at least, maybe at that time.
No, I don't think they were running cigarette ads on television by then.
By 83?
By 83, I don't think they were.
Some Virginia Slim commercials, some Salem commercials.
Maybe. Beer, definitely.
Yeah, okay. Well, you could have
Had a
beer
lot
at
of
least.
those.
Just not the hard liquor.
It's a damn shame. That would have been so many product tie-ins they could have dropped in this thing, so many product placements they could have done on that.
Well, yeah, and it's time to reboot
It's a remake
this.
of The Day After. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, but make television the event that it used to
Go
be.
like
you
the
know?
Friday road and go the day after, the next day after, or the day after next, or
Friday
something like
after
that.
next. Yeah.
Something, get Omar Epps involved somehow in the Jason Robards
Mike
role.
Epps. Yeah,
Was it?
yeah.
Was it Mike Epps?
Yeah, Omar Epps was different. Yeah.
But in terms of setting up what we're supposed to experience in the back half of this movie, we do get a ton of exposition. We get a lot of people who we have never met before in the movie are suddenly experts on what's about to happen. I don't think we even figure out who exactly John Lithgow is supposed to be in this movie, other than he's a science person
Yeah.
of some nature who likes to hang out in barbershops.
Is he like some kind of professor of something? Like, are
He
those
was
his students? I don't remember.
I don't know. As far as I know,
That's what it felt like.
he was
kind of,
hanging out at
but-
the barbershop, shooting his mouth off, and then weaseled his way into the University of Kansas.
They cut out that quartet sequence that he did in the barbershop, by the way.
Did they really? Was that restored for the theatrical release that they
I don't
released
know,
overseas,
I don't know.
perhaps?
I think it was in the style of Five Neat Guys, by the way.
the four of them.
Yes.
I see, because the other one died.
Yeah.
I think. So I pulled a clip here of possibly John Lithgow, possibly playing Dr. Lizardo pre-Buckaroo Banzai, doing his science thing in a barbershop with nobody asking. Just thought he'd throw it out.
Make it pretty, Ollie. This is my last trim as a free man. I'm getting married tomorrow.
Is that right?
Yep.
Well, congratulations, now.
Who knows? The president's speaking on television at 6 tonight. Maybe he'll tell us something new.
They'll tell us what they want us to hear. Keep the panic at the low sweat stage.
I really don't think either side wants to be the first to use a nuclear device.
It's not a question of who, but where. Over whose real estate. Say we explode a nuclear bomb over their troops on our side. The fallout had better not drift over to their side.
They're crazy. How do they expect it's going to stop with just one bomb?
You want to know what crazy is? Crazy's not staying out of other people's business. We shouldn't be over there in the first place.
Well, maybe they'll contain it. After all, I've still got symphony tickets for tonight.
The thing that bothers me is that damn Lantron warning.
What's that?
That's when one side tells the other that they're going to fire their missiles as soon as they think the other guy's missiles are already on the way.
You know, use them or lose them.
What do you really think the chances of something like that happening way the hell out here in the middle of nowhere?
Nowhere? There's no nowhere anymore. You're sitting next to the Whiteman Air Force Base right now. That's about 150 Minuteman missile silos spread halfway down the state of Missouri. That's an awful lot of bullseyes.
Well, thank you for throwing that in there, Joymaker. Answering the question no one asked.
Exposition.
It is a lot of it. And like I said, we have no idea who this guy is other than he reads magazines at barbershops because he can't afford to get the subscriptions on his own, I suppose. But he is right. There wasn't any nowhere anymore. I mean, I was located, at the time that this was on TV, I was located 90 miles away from an Air Force base, which is way too far for us to be a target. But we did have the nuclear train, I found out later. This was a train that was carrying either radioactive waste or some kind of nuclear material that would roll through town on its way to New Mexico. In the dead of night, we weren't supposed to know it was there, but a few people went out and shot video of it every once in a while. And I never saw the train in person, but I did see the video that was shot of it. And if you can imagine a series of unmarked boxcars with gun turrets on top rolling through your town in the dead of night, it's a little disturbing.
Yeah.
That's how close everybody is to this stuff, or was at the time anyway.
Yeah.
Where there were no missile silos around. But still, there was no getting away from this stuff.
Kind of puts a damper on your day.
And then something like The Day After comes on and sort of starts driving things home to you. But there's still really, what do you do with that information? And that's something that they never quite addressed in this movie. You kind of got the feeling that the movie wasn't even made for you. It was made for somebody else, somebody who could make those decisions.
Do you think this
Perhaps.
was very like a political move to make this movie? Like the
It
whole
would seem like an
backstory?
odd choice. I mean, it is
Yeah,
ABC.
it
It is just network television.
But just, let's keep the threat out there. Or
Possibly,
let's bring
I
it
don't know.
home, literally home to people.
It's really hard to say. I mean, you could say that they produced it for the prestige of producing it, which would be an odd choice to make. Like I said, they ran the whole back half with no advertising, so that wasn't on the table.
But it was immensely successful. So you could look at it like
I think the figures were something like 100 million people, by their best estimate, watched this. And this was I don't know what the population was at the time. I don't know what the numbers for MASH were for the final episode of MASH, but it's up into that territory that we can't achieve anymore because we don't have, only 4 channels to choose from these days.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I think you could either watch The Day After or maybe Three's Company was on or something like that if you wanted to.
Yeah, you had
to do
you
that,
had
but that
VHS too and Beta, so maybe you had that.
And Beta,
alternative,
that's true. We did have Beta.
Yeah.
But there was a theatrical version of this released, I think.
Was it? I don't know that it was domestic though. International.
No, it was
yes,
international,
it was.
yes.
Yeah.
And they petitioned for years to get it shown in the Soviet Union, and I think it took about 6 years.
Really?
And
so what? By the time the Cold War,
Right about
had
the time
ended,
it was all going to be over with anyway, because the Berlin Wall came down my last semester of high school.
And what did you have directly to do with that?
I can't talk about that. I can neither confirm nor deny that I had anything to do with the Berlin Wall falling down there. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But that happened, and then driving on my way to move into the freshman dorms in college is when the Soviet Union officially collapsed. So everything started happening very fast, and no credit to this movie, I don't think, because they really didn't get it shown in the Soviet Union until middle of '89, I think. I could be wrong about that. I didn't put it in my notes. They tried to keep it going for a long time, and nobody did anything like this afterwards that I can remember.
Well, I mean, we talked about Threads prior to the recording.
Threads, okay.
Yeah.
So neither of us have seen Threads,
Well,
but I feel like
the-
I've heard enough about it
Yeah.
to say that the British really saw this movie and said, okay, how can we make this more horrible? It's like, let's take every possible outcome of every scene and make it the most horrible outcome for that scene that we can possibly manage.
Yeah. How real can we
and
make
string this all
Yeah,
together.
Yeah.
I don't remember Threads as being particularly popular with the audience.
It's notorious. I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's had this legendary status ever since. It's kind of almost superseded The Day After in more of an underground fashion.
Right.
As people will bring that into the conversation. If you talk about The Day After, it's like, yeah, but have you seen Threads? That's the next step to the nth degree. Yeah. But there was other, kind of the doomy, gloomy movies beyond that where you had simple ones like, well, you can have like outbreak type scenarios, but then probably the closest one in terms of scope would maybe be the next year with Red Dawn as an invasion type, Cold War type thing. It's not of this magnitude, but it's certainly in that vein, but whole paranoia.
It was an interesting premise for sure. And
your hometown, like the Kansas, and it's just going to get
suddenly
locked.
invaded by Cubans for no apparent reason.
Right.
I don't think the Cubans would have been all that interested in invading my hometown necessarily.
No, but if they had Ron O'Neill heading them, like
Superfly,
Youngblood Priest ahead of them, that might be worthwhile. But no, but it's that, and then there was, I want to say, wasn't there another one? There was a lot of like, of course you had
Doomer movies.
Definitely.
Playing out the doomsday scenario one way or another, for sure. Once the missiles have dropped in this fantastic sequence of, people getting turned into X-rays, including a horse that was running in slow motion while it got blown up. Like we're supposed to have a connection with this horse from before. I don't know who it is. I felt sorry for him. I'm sure, but
Yeah, it could have been Mr. Ed. We don't know.
In a blast of quickly edited stock footage, including a really good-looking nuclear explosion, which was, I think, shot in the same cloud tank where they did the Mutara Nebula for Wrath of Khan.
Oh, wow.
I believe it was exactly the same one.
Okay.
We get this spectacular sequence, and then the amount of dialogue you get between the characters starts to drop off slowly. They're talking less, they're grunting a lot more, staring at the ground, and just sort of dissolving. And especially in the case of Robards, who really starts dissolving by the end of the movie. Civilization is over. It's done.
Yeah.
And we get these spectacular sequences like what happens in Northern Exposure Guy's basement. I can't remember the character's name.
Oh, I couldn't tell you.
So I don't think they even mention it once, other than his daughter was supposed to get married, engaged in premarital sex, which is never explicitly said in the movie, but heavily hinted at.
Yeah.
And then goes completely bonkers.
Runs outside. Yeah.
Which we'll play that clip for you because it's kind of funny but kind of disturbing.
What is it? Day or night?
Day, I think.
What day?
Wednesday.
It's Thursday. 2:30.
I wonder if it's sunny out.
I can't remember.
Can't remember what?
It's only been 5 days, and I can't remember what Bruce looks like.
Well, now we all been through a lot, sitting here in the dark.
What are we doing down here anyway? It's all over, isn't it? It smells so bad down here, I can't even breathe.
Now listen, Denise, you get a hold of yourself. Now you know that we cannot go out of here.
Why did I have to use that thing? We'd be married by now anyway. Why didn't I at least get pregnant?
Just pipe down, Denise.
Because now I can't even see his face! I can't see anything! I can't see anything! I can't see anything!
Denise, honey, now just calm down. Get hold of
Let go of me! I can't see! You can't go on there! No!
Wait a minute. I'll get it. I owe you.
No, Jim.
So to be fair, I mean, we last saw Bruce 20 minutes before in this movie, and I couldn't remember what he looked like either. So
yeah.
I
And
didn't
by
even know
this
his name
point,
was
I'm
Bruce,
thinking,
honestly.
yeah, I was thinking like, I don't know, Bruce Lee. I mean, for a moment, I was trying to remember because there's so many Bruce Lee clones that.
Right, they had that farm in the Amazon.
I'm thinking, is it like Dragon Lee that she's talking about? I don't know. No, not at all. Anyway.
Wait, The Last Dragon came out after this, right?
Yeah, that was 85.
Or They Call Me Bruce may have been what she was thinking of.
Right, that was 82.
And They Still Call Me Bruce.
Yeah, so she was thinking of Johnny Yoon.
Possibly.
Yeah, she was channeling her Margot Hemingway. Yeah.
Why didn't I have a baby with Johnny Yoon when I had the chance?
That's what most women say, I think. I think if you go back to that era, most women would agree.
And maybe you were too, but I was really, really wanting when she jumped up and started screaming to have a replay of the scene from Airplane where they're just shaking her and telling her to get a hold of herself and smacking her around.
That's a good point. Yeah.
That comes up with the wrench, boxing gloves.
They get the lineup of people ready to go.
Now you got a movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just gets more and more depressing as the movie goes on, and you get that sense of this isn't going anywhere good.
Well, that scene it goes into this whole where Steve Guttenberg chases her into the field, and it's pretty depressing when you see all the livestock dead and covered in ash, and he's trying to explain to her, you can't see it. It's out there. It's going through you. You
can't smell it.
Right.
You can't hear it. You
Yeah.
can't taste it.
Yeah.
You can't put it in your pocket.
Yeah. Sounds like a Buzzcocks song or something, maybe.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Anyway.
if the day after it had a soundtrack album released, they could have put the Buzzcocks on there and been perfectly fine, I think.
Something's gone wrong again would be the theme song, really. Yeah.
So anyway, we have her moment of hysterical blindness, rescued by Steve Guttenberg in was he wearing track shorts? I don't remember if he was wearing track shorts.
No, he was not doing it. Can't Stop the Music.
See,
routine.
another missed opportunity by the producers of the day after. They really didn't do a very good job, did they? Well, in terms of being a dramatic movie in and of itself, it doesn't really work that well, I don't think. It's just, like we said, they have too many plot lines that just sort of conveniently get blown to bits.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. Like, was this proposed as a miniseries?
I think it was.
It should have been.
I think it was originally.
Because there's so many threads introduced, no pun intended, but that you think they're going to follow through on a lot of this.
Well, it was sort of like the problem we've seen with some other movies where it was originally planned as a 2-night event.
Yeah.
And was written that way and shot that way. And then they decided later on that it needed to be a 1-night event and had to cut like 45 minutes out of this movie. And that's when Nicholas Meyer and his editor walked out because they didn't want to have to deal with this. They were dealing with censorship from ABC, who suddenly got skittish about a nuclear war movie because apparently they had no idea what they were getting themselves into
when
at
they
first.
did the red light on that,
Yeah.
Or green light, rather.
But they was in editing for something like 6 months before they brought Meyer back because he was the only one who had put together any version that worked. And he managed to get it down to about the 2-hour version that we have.
I didn't know any of that. So that he had to make the serviceable version.
A serviceable version, which may explain some of the gaps as to who these people are, why we don't get... Not that I particularly wanted a whole bunch more backstory on these guys.
But like you're saying, the dramatics of it, you don't play through a lot of that stuff. And
why am I supposed to care about this person? That kind of thing.
This could go back to what you're talking about, the advertising aspect of it, to where if you do a 2-night event, well, the second part is going to be it's going to be the actual main event and then the aftermath. So who would want to sell advertising for that 2-hour block?
A shameless man would want to sell advertising.
There
for
you
that
go.
block.
I mean, that's probably what it came down to, where ABC kind of got cold feet over it because they're like, well, initially maybe they did propose it as a 2-night event, and now how do we do that?
That could be. And also the blowback after this airing was really something else as well. We'll get to that in a minute. But one last clip to depress everyone out of their minds would be the message. What is the message
Gotta get there.
of the day? They have to put a pin in it, and they leave that up to our possibly pregnant, maybe not pregnant anymore, hospital patient who really lays it out there for everybody and tells you this is what you're supposed to think after the day after.
Maybe that's why you're 2 weeks overdue.
If you were in utero and you had any choice about the matter, would you be dying to be born into a world like this?
Do you think your baby's deciding whether or not to be born?
Do you think I'm holding back by force of will, Dr. Oakes? Bad toilet training.
No, I think you've got to be willing to let your baby come whether you like it or not. You're holding back hope.
Hope for what? What do you think's gonna happen out there? You think we're gonna sweep up the dead and fill in a couple of holes and build some supermarkets? You think all those people left alive out there are gonna say, oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't my fault. Let's kiss and make up. We knew the score. We knew all about bombs. We knew all about fallout. We knew this could happen for 40 years. Nobody was interested.
I can't argue with you.
Argue with me. Please. Give me a reason. Tell me about hope. Tell me why you work so hard in here.
I don't know.
Ooh. This comes pretty close to the end of the movie, too, where she name drops the famous Joan Collins movie, I Don't Want to Be Born. For no reason that I can figure out.
And why isn't Donald Pleasance in this, too?
He's not in this one. There's no dwarf that's cursed her or anything. It was
and Joan Collins was on Dynasty at the time, right?
That's true.
She could have guest starred in this.
No. Maybe they got blown up.
Maybe. Well, she was like, well, if Bird Eye Gordon isn't doing it, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
There's not giant ants.
Could be.
Yeah.
So we've laid out the heavy message. And from this point forward, whoever hasn't died in the movie dies pretty soon.
Yeah.
Northern Exposure guy gets blasted with a shotgun for reasons, and he dies. Robards continues to disintegrate until he makes his way back to his original house and collapses in the dust. And the movie draws to a merciful conclusion, followed by a crawler that goes into how they made this movie with the hopes that it would open up people's eyes and people in charge would do the right thing. Needless to say, that didn't happen.
Well, years later, Spike Lee did the right thing.
He did the right thing, yes.
That had nothing to do with
Nothing
this.
to do with this. No, he missed the mark completely on that one. But no, there are some apocryphal stories that Reagan watched the movie and it prompted him to want to do something about nuclear armaments. There's nothing to back that up, though. There's no documentation. There was a story going around that Nicholas Meyer received a telegram from the White House, which Meyer has since denied that it ever happened. And so whether or not the movie really had any long-lasting impact, we'll never really know for sure. What we do know is that some people really, really, really did not like this movie very much after it came out.
Yeah, it's a bit of a downer. Was this on a Sunday night?
I don't remember, but the New York Post accused Nicholas Meyer of being a traitor for directing this movie. The National Review, of all people, accused the movie of promoting unpatriotic ideas.
What, survival mode?
Well, most of this was because they deliberately obscured who shot first.
Right, because it's a fable.
Yeah, and this was a very conscious choice on their part. So the U.S. military didn't want to be involved in helping out with this movie unless it was made clear that they were not responsible. So they just said, okay, we're going to do our own thing. Thank you very much. We got our stock footage. We're done.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a major sticking point with a lot of people was they thought because it wasn't expressly said in the movie that the Soviets shot missiles first, then it must have been the U.S. And therefore the people who made this movie are traitors to our country and promoting unpatriotic ideas. Is a very, very touchy subject.
Yeah.
Now, I kind of agree with the idea that they should have obscured it because it doesn't matter.
Right. It's just the situation and how to deal with it and the aftermath. That's the story.
Right. And they even had, right after the movie aired, there was a special episode of a show called Viewpoint that's not around anymore. I think it was maybe developed just for this, where Carl Sagan gave his now famous talk about nuclear armaments, where he described it as two men locked in a room soaked with gasoline arguing over who has the most matches.
Okay.
That was the point of what they were getting at, not necessarily the fine details
who did
of
what.
Who did what.
It doesn't matter.
Once it's done, it really doesn't matter at all because Robards is going to get killed. He'll never make Parenthood. It's just a very sad thing.
And he's like, it's bad enough I already went through Something Wicked This Way Comes, and now something more wicked comes and takes me out.
I don't think I've ever seen Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Oh, it's great. It's great October viewing. Not just the fact that it's it's not really Halloween related, but it's the fall.
Oh, okay.
Very October. Yeah. Watch it. Pam Grier's in it. Jonathan Pryce is brilliant in it.
Jonathan Pryce. Well, you sold me at Pam Grier. Yeah, so that's the day after. I don't think I'll ever watch it again. I don't think it's the kind of thing that, it's a Friday night and you're sitting on the couch with a girlfriend thinking, what do you feel like watching tonight? The answer is never going to be the day after.
Well, yeah. But the other thing too is we grew up around this movie, or you more so than I did. I mean, I came into it a little bit later, but I remember the mania surrounding it.
Sure.
And like you touched on how who could see it, who couldn't, what kids in your class were able to see it.
That fear of missing out on.
And then you would hear the stories, the playground stories the next day or so about, oh, well, what happened? And it was always, this is one of those instances where, you know, kids would exaggerate things greatly when they would tell you, like, and they may not have even seen the film. But in this case, when you watch it, you're like, it's pretty spot on, whatever I'd heard about it. But I would revisit this as kind of a, maybe you can get in the 80s trend, but it's of that moment, and it was an event, and I love Nicholas Meyer. So in that sense, I'll revisit it. But yeah, it's not your feel-good movie, you know?
No, as far as apocalypse movies goes, it is one of the better ones. I would put it up there with, as far as realism goes, I would kind of put it up there with On the Beach.
Yeah.
Or Damnation Alley. No, not Damnation Alley.
That's far more realistic now.
Although they did use stock footage from Damnation Alley in this movie. Yeah.
Nice.
You have to look sharp for it, but it's
another
in
mark
there.
for it. Wow. Very cool.
We're recycling the apocalypse over and over and over again.
Very good.
And with that, I think we're done talking about The Day After. I'm certainly done watching it.
That's
I think you're done watching it. Be kind and rewind.
Yes.
Don't sing if you want to live long. They have no use for your song. You're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead and out of this world. You'll never get a second chance. Plan all your moves in advance. Stay dead, stay dead, stay dead, stay dead and out of this world.
That's it. The show is over. Thank you for listening. The Smooth Thrills Radio Hour is a production of Ghostcraft and is recorded live in Dallas, Texas. Please email your questions and comments to autopilot at smoochthrillsradiohour.com. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Don't ever talk with your eyes. Be sure that you compromise. You're dead.